I was halfway out of my truck when I heard it the shrillest voice this side of the Rockies. "You can't park here. This is private property." I turned, keys still in hand, to see a woman storming across the gravel like she owned the forest. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, clipboard in hand. Yep, classic HOA Karen. Literally. Her name was Denise. Denise Claiborne, president of the Whispering Pines HOA. I just pulled into the driveway of my own damn cabin. A place I'd bought 6 months ago, cash, after years of busting my back as a construction foreman. This wasn't some vacation rental. I came up here every other weekend to get away from the city noise and drink coffee in silence. It was mine, and I had the deed to prove it. Denise didn't care. She marched up to the front of my truck and jabbed her pen toward the ground like she was commanding troops. "You're violating HOA parking rules. Vehicles must be fully inside the garage or they get towed." I raised an eyebrow. "Garage? Lady, this is a log cabin." "There's no garage, just this gravel pad, same as every other place up here," she sniffed. "Then you're in violation of Section 4.2c. All vehicles must be parked in designated areas." "This is my designated area," I said. "I own the land." "Got the title in my glove box." Denise's lips pursed like she'd sucked a lemon. "You're new here. Clearly you don't understand how things work in Whispering Pines." I looked around. Nobody else was out, just me, my truck, the trees, and this walking migraine with a clipboard. "I understand perfectly," I said. "You're trying to scare me into doing what you say." She stepped closer, voice rising. "You think you're special, rules apply to everyone. I'll have this vehicle towed by morning if it's still here." I laughed, couldn't help it. "You're gonna tow a truck that's parked on private property, my property? Good luck with that." Her face went red. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. I walked right past her toward the cabin but paused halfway up the steps. "By the way," I said, "you do know I installed cameras last weekend, right? Got full view of the driveway, just in case someone tries anything unlawful." She froze. Her mouth opened for a second, then snapped shut. "Enjoy your clipboard, Denise." I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. Through the window, I watched her storm back down the driveway, heels crunching the gravel like angry firecrackers. That night, I didn't sleep much. Around 2 in the morning, I heard tires crunching outside. I peeked through the blinds and sure enough, flatbed tow truck creeping up the road. I turned on the porch light and stepped out, shotgun in hand, not loaded, just for show. The driver spotted me and stopped cold. "Hey," I said, calm and loud. "You here for my truck?" He looked sheepish. "Some lady said it was abandoned." "Yeah, well, it ain't. And it's parked on private property. You want to keep your license, I'd suggest backing off before a sheriff gets involved." He hesitated, then nodded, threw the truck in reverse and rolled back down the hill. But I wasn't done. The next morning, I drove down to the county sheriff's office and filed a formal report. Attempted vehicle theft. I brought my footage, printed stills, even caught Denise's license plate as she followed the tow truck up the hill in her Lexus. Deputy McAllister didn't say much, but he raised his eyebrows more than once. "Mind if we pay her a visit?" he asked. I grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that." Denise's face didn't show up around my cabin for the next few days, which was surprising. I figured she'd be back with another rulebook or threat, but apparently the deputy's visit made more of an impact than I expected. Still, I knew better than to assume she was finished. People like her didn't stop, they regrouped. By the following weekend, I was back at the cabin, dragging cedar planks off my trailer to rebuild the back deck. Sweat rolled down my neck as I worked, and the sound of hammering filled the trees. Just as I was securing the last board, an SUV pulled up and parked at the edge of the property line. A man in a navy suit stepped out, mid-50s, receding hairline, expensive watch, and a face that looked like it had never seen a day's hard labor. "Mr. Russo," he called. I set the hammer down and wiped my hands on my jeans. "That's me," he adjusted his cufflinks. "Martin Lanning. I'm the HOA's legal counsel. Denise asked me to speak with you on her behalf." I leaned against the railing. "She hiding behind suits now, that's new." I assure you, I'm just here to clear up a misunderstanding. He opened a leather folder and held out a paper. The HOA believes there's been an error in the property lines, specifically that your driveway extends beyond your official boundary and onto common land. I stared at the paper but didn't take it. You accusing me of stealing land now? Not stealing, he said, too smoothly. But perhaps unknowingly encroaching. The board is prepared to offer a resolution if you agree to relinquish the disputed 10 feet. The HOA will drop any pending complaints. I crossed my arms. Funny. I had the survey done myself when I bought the place. County records confirm every inch. You're 11 feet off, not me, he blinked. Perhaps we could review the documents together, already shared them with the sheriff, I said. And my real estate attorney, what Denise is doing, that's attempted fraud. His mouth tightened. Let's not escalate things unnecessarily. I stepped off the deck and walked right up to him. You're standing on private property. I suggest you leave before I call the same deputy who paid Denise a visit last week. He closed the folder with a snap and turned without another word. That night, I drove into town for supplies, gas for the generator, some fresh eggs from the farm stand. When I came back, something felt off. The cabin looked the same, but the air was quiet in a way that made the back of my neck itch. I walked around the side and crouched by the crawlspace entrance. The padlock I'd installed last month was missing. In its place was a new lock, shiny, untouched, and definitely not mine. I didn't waste time. I called Deputy McAllister and explained what I found. He told me to stay put and arrived within 20 minutes, headlights cutting through the trees. He crouched beside me, flashlight scanning the lock. This isn't standard HOA procedure, he said, frowning. You give anyone permission to access down here? Nope. Only time I've been under there was to check the water lines in February. We pried the lock off with a crowbar from my truck. What we found inside made my stomach tighten. A small wireless camera had been mounted beneath the floorboards, aimed upward right toward the center of my living room. McAllister didn't say anything for a second, then he stood up slowly. Well, that just turned into a felony. We spent the next few hours combing the rest of the crawlspace and found 2 more devices, one pointed toward the water heater, another covering the breaker box. All looked brand new. All wired to a single battery hub with a SIM card uplink. Someone wanted eyes in here, McAllister said, and they didn't want you to know. By dawn, the sheriff's office had a forensics team bagging evidence. McAllister asked if I could identify who might have had access, and I didn't hesitate. Only folks who have been sniffing around lately are the HOA, Denise and her lawyer, he nodded. We'll run the serials. If these were purchased with a card, we'll find out whose. I stayed off the property the next 3 days, not because I was afraid, because I wanted them to think I was. Let them believe I'd backed off, that their stunt worked. Meanwhile, I drove to the county clerk's office and requested the original HOA charter and all amendments filed since its inception. Took the better part of a morning, but what I found was gold. In 1999, Whispering Pines HOA had filed a boundary adjustment to absorb a section of undeveloped forest into common land. Problem was, the county never approved the filing. The plat map still showed those lots as privately owned, unclaimed, and untaxed. Which meant any HOA control over that land was non-existent. Guess where my driveway sits? I sent copies of everything to McAllister and my attorney. Then I waited. On Friday, a marked cruiser rolled into the HOA office parking lot in town, a warrant in hand. I wasn't there, but the clerk texted me later, said Denise came out yelling about misunderstandings and political harassment before being told to sit down and stay quiet. Apparently, the cameras had been purchased with the HOA's corporate card and shipped directly to her address. The local paper ran the story 2 days later. HOA president under investigation for illegal surveillance. I returned to my cabin that weekend. No clipboard patrols, no legal threats, just the sound of birds, wind through the pines, and the crackle of firewood in the hearth. I didn't need to post any signs. The news had done that for me, but just to be sure, I installed 2 new cameras, not hidden big, obvious ones with blinking red LEDs. One pointed at the driveway, the other at the road. Let them know, I see you now. By the second week of June, the mountain air had traded its spring chill for dry heat, and the scent of sun-baked pine needles covered the trail like a quiet warning. I'd just returned from town with a box of electrical conduit and 2 bags of quick-set cement when my phone rang. Unknown number. I took the call anyway, Mr. Russo, the voice said. This is Assistant DA Valerie Grant, Jefferson County. We're opening a formal investigation into the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. I understand you've recently submitted evidence related to illegal surveillance. I set the box down on the porch. That's right, I forwarded everything to Deputy McAllister, cameras, receipts, even the county plat discrepancy. We've reviewed the materials, she said. And we've launched a broader inquiry based on additional complaints. Your case may be part of something larger. How much larger? Potential fraud, misuse of HOA funds, and unauthorized boundary enforcement, she said. We'd like to speak with you in person this week. By Thursday afternoon, I was sitting in a quiet office downtown while Valerie, sharp-eyed, mid-30s, wore a badge on her belt like she meant it flipped through a manila folder. Did you authorize the HOA to make any modifications to your property? She asked without looking up. Absolutely not, I said. They've been trying to push me off my own driveway since the day I moved in. She stopped at a page and tapped it with her pen. This invoice shows a $5,000 charge for easement regrading and border compliance billed to the HOA last month. It lists your address as the project site. I leaned forward. They never touched my land. That's a fake invoice. We thought so too. The contractor listed here doesn't exist. It's a dissolved LLC from 2 years ago. What does that mean? It means someone fabricated a receipt to cover a non-existent job, likely to siphon HOA funds for personal use. My pulse quickened. You think Denise wrote herself a check? That's the theory. We're working on bank subpoenas now. If it holds, we're looking at embezzlement. I left the DA's office with a copy of my statement and a tight knot in my chest. This wasn't just about power trips and rulebooks anymore. This was theft, real, organized, and deliberate. The next morning, I drove up to the overlook above Whispering Pines. From there, you could see the whole neighborhood. Clusters of cabins tucked between trees, winding gravel roads, and the HOA office, a windowless prefab structure near the entrance gate. There were 2 county vehicles parked out front. I pulled out my binoculars and watched silently as 2 plainclothes investigators carried boxes out of the office. A uniformed deputy stood by the door, arms crossed down below. Denise appeared. She burst from the office, red-faced, waving papers in one hand and pointing furiously at the officials like they were trespassers on her personal kingdom. The deputy intercepted her and calmly guided her back inside. I didn't bother going down. I'd seen enough. Back at the cabin, I focused on finishing the new concrete footing for the shed. Working with my hands always helped me think. While I poured the mix and leveled the brackets, I couldn't get one thing out of my mind. That fake invoice hadn't been random. It had been specific. My address. My property, which meant they weren't just trying to push me out, they had a plan. That night, I pulled out the original development maps I'd archived when I bought the place. I laid them out on the kitchen table, side by side with the amended boundary maps Denise had tried to shove down my throat 2 weeks ago. The difference was subtle enough to slip past most people, but not me. There, in faint red ink, was a proposed utility corridor that cut across 6 lots, including mine. It was labeled as Future Easement Phase Roman II Expansion. I stared at it. There was no Phase Roman II. The HOA didn't have the authority to add new homes, and the land was zoned for single residential use only. But if they could harass a few owners into giving up their property's file some backdated easements, fudge a few records, they could try to consolidate the plots into a shared use zone. And sell it off. I drove into town the following day and met with a land use attorney named Glenn Vega. Retired city councilman, sharp as a nail, and known across the county for chewing up shady developers like sunflower seeds. Glenn studied the maps in silence for a long time. Then he looked up and said, "They're trying to create a pseudo-condo development. That's why they want your land. You're the last piece in the puzzle." "Is that legal?" "Only if they own all the parcels, which they don't, and falsifying easements." "That's real jail time. Can we stop it?" "Not only that," he said, "we can burn the whole operation down." Over the next week, Glenn and I compiled everything: the forged invoices, the illegal surveillance, the unapproved boundary adjustments, and now the altered development plans. He drafted a formal complaint to the state's HOA regulatory board and filed a cease and desist to halt any Whispering Pines activity tied to land use or development. Meanwhile, the DA's office expanded their warrant to include Denise's personal residence. They found stacks of HOA records in her garage, including internal memos about clearing resistance and quietly absorbing fringe parcels. She was arrested the following Monday. The news spread fast. By Wednesday, half the community had shown up to a special meeting called by the interim board. Denise's supporters, those who'd barked about neighborhood standards and property values, at every meeting suddenly vanished like fog in sunlight. I stood near the back of the room while Glenn laid out the facts. The HOA president falsified financial records, illegally surveilled residents, and attempted to manipulate land boundaries for personal profit, he said. Every resident who received a notice about easement violations or property line conflicts, you were targeted. People gasped. A few cursed under their breath. An older man in a flannel shirt raised his hand. "So what happens now?" Glenn nodded toward me. "Mr. Russo's testimony and evidence were instrumental in bringing this to light. Without his vigilance, this plan might have succeeded." A few heads turned my way. Someone clapped, then another. Before I knew it, the room was on its feet. I didn't say much. Just gave a nod and let them have their moment. I hadn't done it for recognition, I just wanted to live in peace. Later, as the crowd dispersed, a middle-aged woman with silver braids approached me. "My name's Lorna," she said. "I live 2 cabins down from you. I never liked what Denise was doing, but I didn't know how to fight it." "You don't have to fight alone," I said. "That's the whole point," she smiled. "You coming to the cleanup this Saturday?" "We're repainting the community board and taking down the old rules signage." "I'll bring the paint thinner," I said. That weekend, I stood with my neighbors in front of the rusted HOA sign. We took turns scraping off the flaking letters. When we were done, someone handed me a brush. I painted the first word myself. Welcome. No threats, no citations, just a simple gesture of community. The pines were quiet that night. For the first time in months, I slept with my windows open, no cameras, no tow trucks, just wind and starlight, exactly what I came here for. The last of the pine pollen was finally clearing from the air when I got the call from Glenn. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "They unsealed the audit reports this morning," he said. "You might want to come by." By then, the interim board had taken over the HOA office, and the place felt more like a local library than a war room. The blinds were open. Coffee brewed quietly in the corner. People actually spoke to each other like neighbors. But when Glenn spread the county audit across the table, the room fell silent. "They tracked over $70,000 in misappropriated funds," he said, running his finger along a column. "Payments to shell contractors. Phantom landscaping jobs. Equipment rentals that never existed." He turned the page. "And here, this is where it gets ugly. These receipts show charges to residents for maintenance fees that were never deposited into the HOA account. They were rerouted to a private bank in Denver." A woman across the table leaned back in her chair. "I paid that fee every quarter for 5 years. You and a dozen others," Glenn said. "All of it's being wrapped into the criminal case. The DA is adding felony theft and money laundering." I stared at the documents and let the weight of it sink in. We'd known Denise was crooked, but this was deeper than anyone imagined. She hadn't just bullied people, she'd siphoned off their trust, their money, and their peace of mind. "Where's the rest of the board from before?" I asked. Two resigned the day after the search warrant, the treasurer's under investigation, the secretary's claiming she didn't know anything, but Glenn tapped a highlighted section. Her signature approved 3 of the fake payments. I nodded slowly. "What about restitution?" Glenn's brow furrowed. "That'll take time. The county's freezing assets now. Best case, the stolen funds get liquidated and returned. Worst case, victims will have to pursue civil claims." The room stayed quiet after that. Sometimes justice didn't come clean and neat, it came in fragments, layered between court filings and forensic accounting. But it was coming. Outside, a breeze rustled the branches, and for the first time since I bought the cabin, I felt something close to closure. Later that week, I got a knock at my door while I was installing the new solar inverter. A man stood on the steps, mid-40s, denim work shirt, worn boots, and a nervous energy in his shoulders. "Name's Doug," he said. "I'm on lot 39. I heard about what you did. Wanted to say thanks." I wiped my hands on a towel and nodded. "We all had a piece in it." He hesitated, then stepped closer. "You ever think about running? For the board, I mean," I nearly laughed. "I'm not exactly the rules and bylaws type." "Maybe that's why you should. We need someone who'll keep folks honest." I didn't answer right away. Honestly, I hadn't thought about it. I'd come to Whispering Pines to be left alone, not to run meetings or chase budgets. But the truth was, things had changed. People were talking over fences now. Neighbors who used to stare at the ground when they passed each other were sharing garden tools and weekend plans. The fear was gone. In its place was something else: ownership. "I'll think about it," I said. Doug nodded. "That's all I was hoping." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, one more thing. You know that old trail behind the north lots, the one Denise said was restricted?" "Yeah, I walked it last fall. Beautiful stretch. Turns out it's county land, public access, always has been. She just posted fake signs to keep people off her back porch." I stared. "So she was fencing off land that didn't belong to her?" Doug grinned. "That's what the county surveyor said. They pulled the signs yesterday. Whole trail's open now." After he left, I grabbed my boots, locked up the cabin, and took the north trail. It curved around the ridge, shaded by ponderosas, and opened onto a clearing with a view that made you forget how to speak. Snow capped peaks in the distance. Hawks drifting in lazy circles overhead. I sat on a log and listened to the wind. For the first time in months, the only sound was nature. No engines, no arguments, no clipboards. The next week, the county courthouse held Denise's arraignment. I didn't attend, but I followed the coverage. Her lawyer tried to paint her as overwhelmed and misguided, but the DA wasn't buying it. The judge denied bail on the grounds of flight risk and tampering with evidence. She was led away in cuffs, head down, lips pressed tight. The same day, the Whispering Pines board posted its first open meeting notice without threats or jargon, just an invitation. Community discussion on future projects, all residents welcome. I stood in the back of the lodge while they debated trail maintenance and snowplow contracts. No shouting, no glares, just people trying to live together without stepping on each other's necks. At one point, someone called for nominations to fill the 2 vacant seats. I raised my hand before I realized I had. The vote wasn't even close. I didn't do it for power. I did it because I'd seen what happened when no one watched the watchers. And if being on that board meant I could make sure this kind of thing never happened again, then that was worth the headaches. That night, as I locked the gate at the base of my driveway, I caught movement near the edge of the property. A familiar Lexus sat parked half-hidden in the trees. Engine off, no lights. I walked toward it slowly, boots crunching dry needles. The window slid down a few inches. Inside sat Denise's husband, Harold, the quiet one. He didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead. "She left a lot of damage behind," he said. "She stole from her neighbors," I replied. "That's not damage, that's betrayal," he nodded once. I didn't know about the money, the cameras, any of it. You didn't ask. He reached into the glove box and pulled out a manila envelope. The last of the HOA's bank statements. She kept these hidden. I found them after they arrested her. I took it, opened the flap, and saw rows of deposits and withdrawals that hadn't shown up in the audit. More fake vendors, more names. One of them rang a bell. Glenrock Partners, a development firm that had tried to buy out Mountain Land last year. She was brokering a sale, I said, trying to flip the neighborhood. Looks that way. I closed the envelope. You should turn this in. I'm not the type people listen to. Well, I said, backing away, maybe it's time you learned how. He didn't answer. Just rolled up the window and drove off slowly, tires whispering over gravel. I handed the envelope to the DA the next morning. It contained everything they needed to link Denise to a wider scheme. Land speculation, zoning fraud, and a quiet attempt to convert residential property into commercial holdings without anyone noticing. They filed new charges by the end of the week. The last board member, still clinging to a seat, resigned after that. The new board passed a transparency resolution requiring all financial decisions be posted online within 72 hours, along with scanned receipts and vendor names. We also banned any third-party surveillance equipment in the neighborhood and installed a locked bulletin board at the trailhead to post community notices, not threats. At the next meeting, I proposed a motion to remove the HOA's power over individual property aesthetics. No more fencing approvals, mailbox color mandates, or fines for plant height. The motion carried unanimously. Afterward, Lorna approached me with a paper cup of cider and a tired smile. I thought I'd have to move, she said. I didn't think we'd win. Neither did I admitted. But sometimes all it takes is one loud scream to wake everyone up. She raised her cup. To the scream, I tapped mine against hers. And the freeze that followed. The wind stirred through the lodge again, but this time it carried laughter, real laughter, the kind that sticks around.